Good evening, folks. We'll order the March 17th, happy St. Patrick's Day, 2022 meeting of the Master Plan Advisory Committee and the Planning Board. It's a joint meeting. Recorded. See anybody that would be recording, and fine, they can record, and we will have it up on our website in a couple of days after the meeting. So I'll ask Vice Chair Jessica to do a roll call. Present.
Present.
Here.
Randy Brown.
Here.
David DeLore.
Here.
Bert Hanson.
He was here.
Yeah, he's here.
Oh, there.
David Williams.
Here.
Norm Seaver.
Here.
Patrick Duff. Alita De Maria is on Zoom.
I'm here. Yep.
Amber Bock. Scott Lehman. Roy Boyd.
Here.
Ross Perry.
Here.
Jessica Parker here. David Sy.
See the Audette in the background?
Amber Bock here.
Some mic's on somewhere.
Michael Doherty. Aaron.
Here.
And Maria Michael.
Here.
Maria.
Okay.
Michael. Oh, yes. Very good. With the roll call, we have a quorum of the Master Plan Advisory Committee. We do not have a quorum of the Planning Board. So with that said, we will go into public comment and dialogue. Anyone from the public out there speak either in the audience here or online? Raise your hand if you want to make a comment. Okay, is Ken Camilla online? Okay. Ken, we have an opportunity here as the master plan consultant, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, if you'd like to share anything with us tonight.
Sure. Thank you, Marcus. So I think this is more of a point where I can at least share some initial insights as far as what I've been able to glean and take away from attending 2 or 3 meetings of the Master Plan Advisory Committee. I briefly spoke with John last week when the agenda was sent my way for review, and I know that John this afternoon sent the KSAs as well as the results from the survey regarding the survey. So I think we, as the committee navigates that and we get towards a survey instrument, I think that will definitely align some of the next steps. I think with regards to some initial insight, I had suggested, and I don't know if the committee has talked about branding. I think that's going to be a very important part of this particular process with regards to, do you have a tagline? You know, in East Longmeadow, it was Envision East Longmeadow. And then in Blandford, it was the Bridge to 2030 Blandford Master Plan or Resilient Master Plan. I know that you had some documents that the students worked on for the last meeting that suggested, you know, maybe I think it was Imagine, but I don't know if that's been given thought. I think as the committee continues to move towards this process, it will definitely identify the work of the committee by establishing a brand, maybe a logo, or some sort of graphic design for the project. And, you know, it would be helpful to put all of those logos and taglines and titles of this particular process on all documents going out to the public. So that was an initial suggestion, and I don't know if that's been talked about within the context of the committee early on. But I think that's something that as the committee continues to prepare a pamphlet, as it continues to start scheduling these engagement efforts in the community, coming up with a branding, I think is going to be an important task. With that said, I know that that was probably one of the biggest things that I just wanted to bring up to the committee and at least put in the mindset of how to identify this particular process and come up with something that is very special to the town, and how to go about doing that. But that's one thing. I think too, one of the other things with regards to the pamphlet, which I believe is under new business, I won't necessarily touch on that now, but with regards to just some initial comments, the most important, as far as I'm concerned, as we continue to, and as the committee continues to move forward during this, is to identify a brand. And I think that's just going to be a very important thing, so that we don't, or the committee doesn't have a hard time in putting everything together at the end of the project when you're like, what are we going to title this plan? What's it going to look like? What are the color schemes? Are we using high school colors? Whatnot. So it's just to understand that. And then, I guess as I have in the past, provide comments, or, if the chair invites me to comment during the rest of your meeting, I'm happy to do that. But initially, I think that was what I wanted to bring up. And I don't know if anyone has any comments regarding that.
We do have sort of the initial handout for the notebook that was given to the members of the advisory committee, Pathway to the Future. And that's been used on the briefing paper that was developed early on to hand out to the finance committee and others, planning board members who were, involved in approving our work and funding the work. So anyway, that's a good thing to be thinking. Give us something to think about between now and the April 7th meeting. Yeah.
So I do have a question.
Well, could you use the
Sure.
for folks online? It's good if you have green light there. I'd have to push it a couple.
Press and hold.
Yes.
So regarding the questionnaire, right? All of this should be done before the questionnaire, I guess. So all of this needs to be done by the questionnaire. And I guess my question is, when are we expecting to have this questionnaire out in front of the public, so we know when all of this needs to be done? And the reason I say that, a determination on what this is going to be, we're condensing the developing our message and the questionnaire being created. So I'm just trying to get a real sense of a timeline in realistic goals and objectives to get to where we need to be for doing this questionnaire.
Okay, I don't know if you were listening there. As far as timeline on getting the questionnaire put together, I'm thinking May would be the announcement and distribution, however it's done, of the questionnaire. This evening, we're going to go over, hopefully we can get through the ranking or polling that was done on the questions that came from other communities and the last survey done in Southwick. So that gives us 2 meetings to, well, the next meeting in April to really say, this is what we're going to have. And I'm hopeful that Ken can give us a draft of the questionnaire, community survey, I guess we should call it community survey, by April 7th. So the committee can look at it and work it. And then we would have enough time to get the process set up to distribute it, how we're going to either mail it out, plus have it online, that kind of thing. So again, we're sort of relying on Pioneer Valley Planning Commission based on their experience, how to distribute it and how to receive the information and process the answers. So, Ken, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think with regards to this, as the committee finalizes questions, and I'm happy to provide some additional suggestions as I'm, quickly going over this. And, I think we're going to talk about that tonight. Yeah, it's my intention that depending on the timeline that the committee sets out, and it sounds like May is a good timeline, if you have it especially open for at least 6 weeks, and then you start planning the engagement after, I think that makes sense. I know that, if you could pair getting the word out with your annual town meeting, that probably would be helpful, creating those pamphlets. I think all of it can be done definitely by May. As I mentioned, I think at a previous meeting, this is probably one of the hardest things to get through, is there are so many different perspectives on what a survey should ask. And as I mentioned in a previous meeting, this should be like a survey that tries to get as much community involvement and sentiment as possible. So as I mentioned, I think at least a 15-minute survey is the expectation. So it will be longer. What it looks like again is you'll have both a paper copy and a digital copy. I've talked to John with regards to Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, as I've done with other communities. We'll host the survey. We'll create a URL for it that makes sense to the process, and we'll manage those responses, and then get subsequent reporting out to the committee, probably for every meeting that the survey would be open. But I think the timeline that has been suggested is workable. You'll want to pair it with a lot of the marketing efforts that I think could be helpful in getting the word out. But I am happy to assist with that as needed. But I think, again, coming up with what the questions and the intent of the questions is probably going to be the hardest, one of the harder tasks for a committee to get through.
Another question here from the committee? Comment?
Question. Hi, Ken. This is Nurse. Can you?
No.
Obregon. A question about the branding and the layout and kind of the design schematic for this survey. How much of that do you think should align with the overall branding and marketing that we're doing? Because a lot of these surveys here that I've looked at, they're very much in the classic survey format, which is fine. That's the intention. But I think there's something that could be done in terms of streamlining the layout, making some of the questions maybe a little bit more approachable in terms of how you answer them. I think there's something that could be done there. Can you just give us some, I guess, advice or insight in terms of how our branding can be brought into the design component of the survey to make it more inviting, to not make it seem so overwhelming, like a test, We want people to be excited to fill it out, not make it feel like homework or anything. Thank you.
For sure. So if I may, I think that you definitely can format the questions in a way that if, for instance, if you were to, and what I've suggested in some of the templates that have been forwarded to you, is that you have various elements that the master plan has to address. So if you happen to have questions, and again, this particular survey will have some additional responses that are related to housing, because you are also preparing a housing production plan in this effort, and there is a requirement of a survey to be done. However, I do think that particular questions, let's say, and I think this was brought up at a previous meeting with regards to the question of land use, if there happens to be certain ways of growth that the town may want to explore, let's say changing certain zoning on certain corridors, that would be an option. And you would have a value score 1 to 5. It's creating the reason of how the responder feels about that particular strategy, and or providing a way for them to do a true or false, or a strongly agree to strongly disagree. You can also do the free response. Those are obviously harder to quantify and navigate depending on how many responses you actually get. But I do think that there is a way to make it look less daunting, but still get the responses that will provide the committee and provide the experts that will be helping draft the plan with the community sentiment, because that's going to be a major component of how to navigate the strategies that the committee and the town will be exploring to implement when you talk about goals. Yeah, short answer is you can definitely create a survey instrument particular to the different types of questions that you can ask and how they're asked and how they're measured, but at the same time get to the brunt, I think, of the true community sentiment.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move on to the business area. First item was the committee knowledge, skills, and abilities. That was emailed out, and
I think we got 14.
14 folks responded. I think just take a few minutes to go through. I think it would be good for folks around the table here and online to get to know the members of the committee and where their interests lie. So I'll just go here. Dory Boyd had economic development, resident experiences, writing and editing.
Still true.
Did we have?
Up on the upper right too. Continuous.
Oh, sorry. Continuous improvement. All right. I was gonna. John, did we have a definition of resident experiences? Or that's just someone who's lived in Southwick?
I don't have a definition for it now.
Dory, did you? I know some other folks had that. Did you have?
I'm sorry, go right ahead. I'll volunteer. So in some of the early responses, those items were essentially added on as selections, so they could show up as checked off, if you will.
Oh, you
So
provided.
that may be, so that was the other column.
Okay. So we had 4 there. Mr. Moglen. Transportation, economic development, future technology, land use, zoning bylaw development. Any comments from you on that?
No, it's kind of what I've done with my involvement with the town in the last 20 years or so.
Okay, great. Randy Brown, Oh, no surprise. Transportation. Resident experiences, recreation, land use. That covered, I guess.
Here's utilities.
Oh, under other utilities. So, water, sewer, that kind of thing.
It's right up his alley.
Right up. David V. Delori. Let's see, resident experiences, recreation, research, documentation, and analysis. Okay. Help out when we compile all those survey responses. And again, working with numbers. So that's good. Roz Terry, economic development, future technology, land use, zoning bylaw development, strategic planning. That's what I see. Yep. So Roz was on the planning board, chaired the planning board. So has been around zoning bylaws for a while.
She chaired a few bylaw committees in her day, if I recall.
Patrick Jubb, economic development, student experiences, healthcare, future technology, environmental concerns, natural resources management. Okay. Contact with students. Good. Healthcare, which is one, is kind of a new one there. Jessica Parker, resident experiences, recreation, healthcare, land use, research, development, and analysis. All right, that's you, right?
Accurate.
That's you. Dave McWilliams, resident experiences, recreation, environmental concerns, facilitation of discussions, natural resources management. Got it. But we'll need some facilitators, I'm sure, once we get into the workshops. Oh, who's this guy? Oh, Marcus Phelps. Managing a planning process, facilitation of discussions, zoning bylaw development, writing and editing, natural resources management.
A pretty apt description of you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mulder.
Works well with others.
Oh, yeah, plays well with us. Yeah, exactly.
Bert Hansen, economic development, land use, facilitation of discussions, writing and editing, communication and collaboration. So we have a couple writer editors, which is helpful.
And one quick comment on that.
Oh.
The reason I checked economic development, even though I'm here for the agriculture. Define, oh, sorry. Hoping we're going to define what kinds of economic development. So, many meetings about the kind of the tension or hopefully the balance between development and preservation. And so, that's why I checked that one.
Scott Lehman, housing, transportation, economic development, recreation, land use. Is our business representative. So it's good we've got a housing person. Marissa Cook Obregon. Land use, environmental concerns, managing a planning process, facilitation of discussions, design, graphic, landscape, architectural,
And
and
speculative design / future design and design project management. Got a little cut off on your print there.
all right. I wonder who's going to work on the pamphlet.
I know, but Mrs. Obergen was nodding feverishly with every one of those. She agreed with everything on that list. It was fantastic. Love it.
Excellent. Dave Spina, transportation, future technology, land use, environmental concerns,
Yeah.
research, development,
Nice. Got it covered.
and/or analysis. Good.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes.
can just add 2 quick points. The question earlier on about the definition of what resident experiences are. The core KSA categories were pulled from the actual PESEL, if you will, chart, if you will. So under each of those individual letters, there were categories beneath them. So to, if you will, spur the dialogue, that's the root of those. You'll notice all 5 of your responses were neatly in a row. So handwritten ones were the ones that were, I'm speaking to the, he's going to get me. I'm so close to the owl. Oh, you're all, I would like to sing, but I'll pass for the moment. The bottom line is, so those additional, anybody who was kind enough to provide a handwritten one, they ended up getting to the running list. Second point, Mr. Norm Cheever long ago provided his information, and I neglected to insert it into today's distribution. So if you'll allow me the luxury, Norm.
You're going to read it into the record.
Yes, I'm reading the record here.
All
Norm's KSAs, anything to maximize survey results. The packaging of data through Excel and PowerPoint, the environment, the economy, and technology.
So you're going to add that to this whole collection.
Yes, and I will redistribute that particular summary.
Well, I appreciate folks participating and kind of get to know where people are and what they are able to do. And, it looks like we've got at least 3 people on in the different areas. So the writing and the editing is going to be useful early on. And then as we go along, the other skills I'm sure will come into play as we start developing the plan itself. So, got through that one. I believe the next one is a little bit of a challenge. Don has put together a good package summarizing the survey question poll that the
To enable sharing.
committee members participating in as to what questions are important to put on a community survey. And John, maybe you can say a little bit about this. Saying we had 13 members who participated, right?
Yes, we did. Give me just a moment. We'll get the results up on
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Zoom.
You can put that on the screen for
Which one? Big Otter?
Yes, that's
folks
thank you for asking.
that are online, committee members, public, plus
Thank you.
Ken Mia.
Oh gosh. Just a moment here.
This gives us a sense of some priority on the community survey. Obviously, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is going to add in some of the standard questions related to people that are completing the survey. But then we need to have other ones. And I think he was saying something like a 15-minute survey. A lot of the surveys have had probably around 30 to 35 questions. We may have more because we're also including a section on housing to have that as a base of information to work on the housing plan. So, John, have you got?
Sure thing. We've got it up on the screen on Zoom here. So what we're looking at here are the 40 some odd questions, and then ranked by order of most common selection amongst the impact members responding. So alignment, if you will, of those particular impactful questions. Top score of 8 out of the 13. So I think for showing a fairly broad spread amongst those interest areas, focus areas, and the members' interests and focuses as well. We can boil this down as far as you'd like. I encourage members to look at the online version as the printed doesn't quite show the gradation quite as clearly, but if you will, that scoring in the second column is going to identify where people have made selections. So I suppose part of the discussion comes down to the prioritization as a group. As we get down to the lower end of common selections or individual, the ones that scored with a single member identifying, there needs to be a decision as to whether or not they remain impactful enough for the survey to be included in the survey. And the final page attached to this does have, if you will, the other items provided by members for everyone to consider, and certainly for us to provide to Ken and see where some of the past utilized questions can be modified, or where we need to shift some of the focus to in the current questionnaire.
Okay, could you go back up to the start at the top? So 8 out of 13 is the score for these first 3 questions. And that means they should be included on the survey some way. I mean, they may be reworded some as Ken works with it, but I think those 3, which relate to the housing types, which will be a question for the housing plan. The second one, should the town encourage new commercial development? Have to see how that works because it says if yes, where. So people may somehow try to describe along College Highway or whatever. So we'll have to see how that might be improved, I guess. What would you like to see in the town of Southwick? That's the third one. And then it has several different selections. I don't know how comprehensive that would be. There is at the end an opportunity to specify something else. So people get next one down gets 7. Score 7. What type of strategy should the town adopt to address future growth? So it gets into how folks would want to see the town grow in the future. And there's quite a long description on that question. So we'll have to see if Ken wants to keep all of that or how it might work. I think would be one to have on. And then we get into a group that had 6, which is about half of the votes. Top 3 reasons why you live in Southwick. Top 5 land uses you view as important. Next one, please check all that you agree with. Housing occurs, oops, not in Blandford. Yeah, let it.
We're in favor of
That would be
development in Blandford.
fine. Elton occurs south.
That's great.
Can't you might want to fix that, but anyway. So that's one, had 6 score. Next one down had a 6. Are you satisfied with the level of services? That's always useful, to get an idea if people feel they're getting, enough services for what they're paying in taxes. Next 2 were fairly short. What would you like to see most in Southwick over the next decade? They want to work in some of the futuring in that. We might kind of improve that question possibly. Some of the trend work or utilize some of that information. And the next one-liner is, should the town encourage new industrial development? So there was one earlier up, I think it was commercial, this is industrial. So I guess they are somewhat separate in the sense that industrial can be a little heavier as far as land and consumption of resources and that kind of thing.
We should clarify definitions instead of discrepancies like that. We have a question like that, commercial development versus industrial development.
So Randy Brown is saying we need to make sure and understand what industrial development is versus, I think the other one, John.
It was commercial, yeah.
Commercial development. Yeah, there it is. Should the town encourage new commercial development? Again, commercial / business. The word is interchangeable. All right, so we got through 6. Nope, one more 6, which is a long one. On a scale of 1 to 5, your level of support for the following strategies for growth. So these are some examples of. It's pretty detailed. It'd be interesting to see if we think citizens are able to understand some of the terminology, like lower density housing. Can they have to work on making that user friendly or something? I don't know what you say.
I feel like that question is kind of similar to the. Growth and strategies to.
It also was a chart in the.
Yeah. Probably combine those, merge them.
Okay.
2 separate
Yeah.
questions.
So both of
Very
the
similar.
long-winded ones kind of duplicate or replicate. Yeah. Okay.
And is there a way to condense the verbiage?
Yeah.
Right.
You're just gonna lose people if you look at.
It says we need to condense the verbiage. All right.
Mr. Phelps, can I ask a general question on here?
Okay.
I was reading through this when it was on the survey thing as well. And the thought occurred to me is, how do you overcome or prevent survey bias so that some of these are some of the questions could lead to a predetermined outcome based on the way you ask the question. And I don't know if that's what we want, for sure. So I don't know if Ken's had any experience with that, or, even in the, there's certain things maybe missing from one of these categories. Maybe we need to take some time to everyone, or as a homework assignment, take some notes on things that you might see missing from some of these questions that you should have in there, or things that we don't want in there. Maybe we'd be biasing the survey even worse or making it a little better. I don't know, but reading these over, it seems like you may not get the answer. You may get the answer you want, but it may not be the right answer for the town of Southwick based on an overall survey if you kind of lead people down a path.
Well, yeah, you just mentioned.
Just yell, Dave.
Yeah, no kidding, you'll hear me. You mentioned get a response that you want. I don't think we want any response.
My point.
Right? So, yeah, I think go back, take a look at them and look at the biases. I agree. I think one of my concerns is when I'm looking at this, right, a full 70% or more than 70% of these questions, less than half of us voted for them. Right? If it's a 5 or under, less than half of us thought it was a good question. And there's more than 70% of those that are 5 or under. So I guess from a total survey question in general, are these great questions?
What got me was started thinking about it when I first read it was, what would you like to see in the town of Southwick? And these are all great things to have, but it doesn't say to me, there's things that are missing. Like, so I just think it would be things that, there's an other, please write in, but if someone wrote place to work, I don't know if to me, that's an acceptable answer for somebody, that lives in the town of Southwick, would love to, live in town, work in town, right? Or, there was other, what do you like about Southwick? Proximity to, work opportunities or proximity to something else is not present. So I think we should take some, you're right, that it is interesting that the best question has half the people on the MPAC in favor of it. So we probably should take some time to write out additional questions if we think that they should be on here, or address some of the questions that are on here. We have a little bit of runway, at least till our next meeting, to do that.
I'd also like to see us use ranked choice voting more. So as opposed to top 3 reasons why you live in Southwick, we should just have them ranked.
Rank them 1 to 5, 1 to 3, whatever.
Like if there's 8 options, rank these 1 through 8 in terms of content there to you. It's gonna be a lot easier online because you can just drag and drop them in order, but on paper, they can number them 1 through 8 or whatever there are.
And I think to that point, and Dave's earlier point on less verbiage, if it was more of a list format or a bulleted format, so you can rather than a paragraph.
Yeah.
Even in the what would you like to see, like, sure, I want all 12, but which one's more important
Yeah.
matters, because we can't do everything.
And Bolton's comment, we need to keep as value neutral as possible. And we watch for words that have some hidden value or whatever to them.
And if you put up 8 choices, they're going to pick from the 8 choices. If there's 2 or 3 other things that they'd rather see that are not on the list, you should figure out some way of making sure those
We usually have
those
another,
somehow too, a couple of other spots. Yeah.
Form as you gathers all the data. Survey, because to figure out how you present that data, right? When you have 19 write-in categories for that.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be important.
See, John, just for clarification, you may have mentioned it, you probably did, I missed it. But the questions that were the additional questions by the members were not included in this survey.
It's on the last page.
No, I know
They were
That's right, they were not.
They were not ranked, no, because they were just, so that could be another assignment for the next meeting is to see what a value out of there do we have. Okay, so we got through 6 school. Oh, yes, Norm. Yeah.
I think how we package the question. Data. You can get a lot more data. For instance, on number 5, there, when we asked if we were satisfied with the services. Okay. One question should have a yes, no, or not applicable. Check. If I have a problem with, let's say, the transfer station, I may degrade the whole line because of my heartburn with the transfer station. I don't have.
Yeah, hear your grievance now.
So I think how we package is very important to get more data, more useful. And also, for related to the 4 people who didn't respond. Hey, I hope I'm in this one. Can we give them an opportunity to further respond? Maybe we do that. Questions that have been added in the last.
Yeah, I think we've gotten through this in the interest of trying to move on.
Yeah.
I'm hoping we can give Ken enough information so he can start to draft something that we can look at the next meeting. And then we have to add in, we should comment on those additional questions. We may get a chance quickly to look at them this evening. Because I'm thinking when we get below 5, we should be skeptical whether or not those are going to be useful on the community survey.
Not to throw a monkey wrench into this process, but I'm having a hard time digesting this as we look at these chapters. So I almost wonder if these questions need to be grouped, like these are the ones related to housing. And where does that fall out? Because it's hard to say if we're covering all of our chapters based on this score.
Right. Okay, that's a good comment, and possibly when Ken works on designing the survey or drafting, it could be on that framework. So we have enough questions in the different areas to get at the information. I mean, the other thing, we're looking at the existing open space and recreation plan, and we have that survey information, which is very current, I would think. So I wasn't looking at having a lot of questions in that area on the community survey. So anyway, it's pretty complicated, and as Ken said, this is one of the hardest parts as far as the beginning of the planning process to get the survey together. So
Mr. Chairman, you have a
yes.
hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who is? Corey. Hi.
Good evening, everyone. I was making notes while you were all showing this. And first off, I agree very much with Mr. Moglen that a lot of the questions are leading the witness. But a couple of other things strike me as some of them are quite tactical, things you wouldn't see in a visioning type survey. I also agree about categorizing them. So if you recall, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about putting them in the right categories, but also leading with some of the future trends so that we do that change of mindset. Otherwise, you're going to get my sort of traditional comment of, I want my bus stop at my driveway. And so somehow we have to get people thinking more, this isn't my latest pet peeve survey. Because with all due respect to Blandford, Southwick is not Blandford. I think we have more opportunities here. So get the randomness, I think, will go away with the categorization that was just suggested. But I think, and I'm sure Ken is an expert at this,
No, it's fine.
got to get away from the tactical questions and get people to really get out of their thoughts about the town today and really what would they like to see if you were designing this town from scratch. What should it look like? And then it's up to the committee to say, all right, what's realistic from where we are today? That'll come out in the visioning sessions too. So I'm just seeing this cold, but just my observations from having done this in several ways before. Thanks.
Thanks, Corey. Appreciate the comments. Jessica has a comment.
I was looking at the Southampton survey, and I think it's more laid out to how we're all in agreement on saying that it needs to be laid out a little bit better. Like they have, this is housing, and then these are the questions that go under housing. And to Corey's even suggesting is, I think if you put, housing and then some of those trends that we identified, and then like housing questions under there, you know, and then like infrastructure. Okay, these are like the trends that are gonna happen, and then those questions. I think that type of layout, I agree with what everyone else has said. It needs to be better laid out for us. We're gonna have so many questions.
Mhm.
It needs to make more sense.
It needs to be organized well,
Yeah,
and maybe a little lead in and weave in some of the futuring kinds of things as an intro to that section. If it, you know, can be short. Okay, so on 5, we're not getting much consensus or much support. I just would want to take a couple minutes to look at the additional questions suggested by members and see how these haven't been screened really to see if there's duplication. And now in the next meeting, folks possibly could, we could set up something again to do a poll to get some kind of a filter of these. I don't know if anybody is here that would be willing to speak to any of these that were suggested. I'll have to see if mine are in here. I don't remember.
Speak to any of the free-form questions from the committee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Into the mic, loudly or into the microphone?
I think the first two are mine,
Okay.
you know, and it was just to real brief answers of why people live here, because if we can understand why people live here, then we should get an understanding of what this town's character is and why people want to continue to live here.
I think that's important to tie when they move here.
Right.
I can speak to the 5 questions in the middle involving came from the Lake Management Committee meeting last Thursday evening. Them and told them we've been the opportunity to come up with possible survey plan.
Great, appreciate that. I think, you know, that's one of the unique resources that Southwick has. There aren't many other towns that have great ponds. And there's been a lot of attention and focus on the lakes because of water quality, recent increase in use, and so forth and so on. So those questions are very helpful, I would say. Anybody want to fess up to any of the others? Oh, Marissa.
I did the third group there. And all of those, the first one's about rural character, and then small businesses, rural character, and then zoning. And ultimately, the gist of all of those questions for me was to really better understand what people think about future development in Southwick. I know that it's not the guise of rurality, but ultimately what I want to understand is, you know, what people don't like, in the democratic sense, you know, we're giving them the opportunity to really voice what they want to say in terms of how the town is developed in the future and whether rurality is something that maybe only a handful of people care about. Maybe the rest don't find it as important. So that's why the question about downtown zoning and the appearance of the downtown area, how much do people want to see that grow if we're thinking about development? Development can take many forms, and that's why those questions were all kind of tied together. That was my intention. Thank you.
So that was
I'm sorry.
the one with the 6.
The third group of questions, so do you want to see Southwick's rural character preserved? Do you
Is that
support
the end?
incentives, attract small businesses?
Oh,
That's the end of
okay.
it. Yeah, there's nothing more.
That right up top.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I could be mistaken, but I think there is a bylaw regarding downtown characteristics of buildings. Is that not correct, John? Moving forward, and you can't go backwards, but moving forward, any buildings have to have certain, meet certain criteria.
We have some
Design
design guidelines in the business restricted zone, as I recall. But I don't know that we don't have a town center overlay district or anything. Or is that kind of regulation? But anyway.
And the sign bylaw has different rules for different parts of town, especially
yeah,
along the
that's right.
corridor.
The
So
size of
that,
the
that's
sign.
influential to that, the look of that. And also just point of reference for those, everyone should have, in the last revision of the revisions to the master plan, there was the thought of moving the town center, which to across from the schools. That didn't go over very well with everyone else. So it was a great idea, but especially with folks that say own land or had businesses through the existing town center that were told that you're no longer in the town center, we're moving it over here. That being said, at my own peril, town center in town of Southwick has had 4 or 5 places throughout its 250-year history, right? It's my understanding that where Big Y is today was town center at one time, right? And then we always discuss whether Depot is the center or Chevelle's Mobile is the center. So, but for planning purpose and a master plan point of view, the design guideline, the sign bylaw dictates some of it for future growth and future stuff that's going to happen there.
Are you saying instead of moving town center, we should define town center?
Well, I think it has, I guess it is kind of self-defining after a while, right? Because it's reading documents over the course of years and Lee Hamburg's books and so on. The center has in fact moved, but the last time it was proposed that someone actually proposed to move it didn't go over very well. So it seems to me that the town center may gravitate on in and of its own, either through zoning or through natural development. And that may take a long time for it to happen. We've had 250 years for it to move 3 times. So, but it's if there was, say there was a development, and I don't want to take over this conversation, but say there was a development on a larger part, say that parcel there, someone bought it and developed a mixed use something, you could see how something like that could actually become a de facto town center in 20 years as stuff gravitates to it, right? So planning and visioning for that, either zoning bylaw change or looking toward that, could have the effect of, instead of mandating that we're, as a, governmentally say, this is now the town center, which nobody wants, it can be encouraged for something to develop that kind of makes that happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll see how that comes out in the
Yeah, I
wash.
see how that ties into the survey somehow. But no, Marissa, it is a good point, and it's part of the discussion here.
Okay, so to wrap it up, let's take some time to look at these additional questions. And I guess consider each question separately and try to give them some kind of a ranking. And
Can I say something about mine?
yeah. What yours were?
I did the second to last group, so there's 2 follow-up / changes to questions and then 3 new ones. They tend to fall towards the bottom with the 1s and 2s, but we're completely ignoring the student and resident experience with what rated high. So that's what I was trying to touch on here, is more of that resident experience and then people's willingness to embrace the trends that were presented last week. So I tried to do some of that. We did all this work to talk about trends, but then we're not asking about it. So I was trying to be direct in, maybe nobody wants to buy an electric car and it doesn't matter.
Well, but to the eloquent job that the students did at our last meeting, right? And part of the whole PESEL analysis too is, I think from a survey perspective and, having, when you see the responses, you have to put that in perspective of this plan being a 20-year deal. So yeah, a lot of people are going to take this survey are going to poo-poo an electric car or whatever powered car, but fact of the matter is, I don't know what it's going to be. None of us really know exactly 30 years from now what transportation is going to be powered by, but planning for that or accommodating that is something that has to be accommodated for in the master plan. You know, whether it's via utilities, whether or transportation, or you know, the gentleman who came and spoke to the planning board about bike racks. I mean, it's all relevant to this.
Okay, in the interest of time, I think we need to move on to
Mr.
next
Chair.
agenda item.
I'm sorry, one thing before we move on. Corey, I lost track bouncing between screens here. Is your hand raised something to contribute, or did I leave it up?
No, it's up from before.
Sorry.
No problem.
As you were, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Okay, so under new business, we're looking at having a calendar of meetings and events where we could have some outreach to the public. And Ross Terry had facilitated a collection of events. Roz, would you like to speak about that?
Sure. Sorry, I'm not there this evening. I did put together an email that went out, and I thank those of you who got back to me. I did send a copy over to John and Megan today. Pretty much in the month of April and May, there's events almost every weekend. Oh, thank you. And I think the key to it is we have to figure out what it is that we're going to be saying. And then we have to make sure that we have volunteers that can go to them. There was also a suggestion today about making sure that we went to different commissions meetings, but most of the boards and commissions, unless I misunderstood the comment, are represented right here at the meeting. So we need to be sure that when we go back to you know, whether it be Park and Rec or Planning Board, that you're giving updates of what's going on and making sure you circle back to us if there's an event that's coming up, you know, and getting permission to be there, to be at the event. I know there's probably, I'm not sure who's involved in which things, who's involved with the Civic Fund, who's involved with Rotary. I know there's flower sales at the mobile station, things like that. Those are all places where we can have a presence, but we do need to decide what it is we're going to be, you know, saying. So if you can keep sending me dates, and once we get together, what our dialogue is going to be, I think it'll be a lot easier.
I think the challenge is going to be to have something to provide to people in the month of April. If we try to do any April events. I mean, I would be hopeful that we'll have a pamphlet and even the survey by early May. So,
and I'm sure more events are going to come up. So I just need everybody to be really aware and keep sending them to me so I can keep updating this.
Because if we had something we go to in April, it would probably be minimal what we would be able to provide to them. I mean, we'd have to have a focal person who would sort of get together a group of volunteers who's going to spend 2 hours sitting at a table, or 4 hours or whatever, to interact with the public and what will be.
Well, I think from the public outreach standpoint, right, we don't need a questionnaire. We just need to inform them that it's coming down the pipe, right? So that they're prepared for it. They understand what it is when it gets to them. So I think the information that we would be handing out at that point, the pamphlet or what have it, would be pretty simplistic.
I would hope, at minimum, we would have a pamphlet or a one-page sheet to hand. The other thing is I have some of these little holders, and you know, we could put something in here, maybe just the list of the committee members, who's on the master plan advisory committee, so people can look at it and say, oh, I know, Spina or Packard Jubb. So maybe I'll say something to them if I have something I'm interested in. So I've got 3 of these. One of them I put in the a summary of the zoning in Southwick. Ooh, exciting, right? But if you do some math, about 75% of Southwick is zone residential. So we have said in our zoning, we are going to be a residential community. Business and industrial is very small percentage. So, I don't know if that's something, whoever puts the information together, it's almost going to be a combination of Marissa and Roz. And the other people.
She's shaking her head yes behind you though, so you're in good shape.
Said
I'm
they
kidding.
were writer editors. Oh,
That's great.
and her mother will also staff the booth.
Can I also say one other thing along the lines of what Corey was saying? I think that our pamphlet needs to provoke forward thinking. It's just simple, some sort of almost suggestions, that's what PR is. We're not going to try to shove things down anybody's throat, but we want them to start thinking about it. And I'm not quite sure how to do that. I'm not an envisionary, but I think that in these early months before the survey comes out, it's just getting people to start that process of thinking and what's going on around them and what they might want. And I'm not quite sure how to go about doing that, but I think that would be our goal before the survey went out. So then when the survey came out, there was already some thought process going on in some people's minds.
Feedback on that comment is first here. To Ken's point about branding, I think the pamphlet would be the first sort of step in that direction, so that by the time and we have some sort of pamphlet, the branding can start to happen. The verbiage is kind of set up, the tagline should align with what people are saying as well. So whatever points that we are going to bring up in person, people really need to reiterate that. So I would be happy to start working on a layout. I do want more direction though in terms of what that verbiage is going to be and how we're going to whittle that down. I was hoping that tonight, having maybe reviewed some of the questions, we'd have a better idea of the direction in terms of how to draw people in. But I'm wondering, based off of the last meeting, I think we had discussed the possibility of meeting to just discuss overall outreach. And I think the branding part, developing a pamphlet, as well as the verbiage would be something that hopefully he could help us with. So I don't know if that is still in the works. And I think it was also discussed as well in relation to the possibility of social media. And I don't know what's going on in the town. Sounded like if we are going to go in that direction, that would be something that would maybe ask us to come in with this on as well to make sure that that's aligned with the rest of the messaging that we have. But layout wise, that can get started. It's just the content itself that I think needs to be finalized. Next meeting that can be.
It would be awesome. Besides having the draft community survey, would be to have some kind of at least a brief outline of the pamphlet. Have the 2 briefing papers, which should give you some text. But then as far as the future kinds of information too, we would want to put that in. And we've got a little bit of time tonight. The last item is to look at putting those future topics, trends into the chart. So I would, want to try to do that. But I'm thinking offhand, we would really interact maybe until the 23rd at the art show, even if we can get to that. I don't know how. I mean, we're meeting on the 7th, and if we have something that we can approve, then we could make it into a basic fold-out pamphlet. And the other part is being able to or steer people to the webpage. So I think an interim meeting, John, if you could facilitate, Ken, Marissa, and maybe even Roz, and anybody else who is in the writing, editing skill set would want to participate. Who was it? Was it Bert?
I was very.
Okay. So we got, 4 or so. And I'm hopeful that Ken, sort of has an idea from the other communities what they were using in the way of outreach to the public. So if we could get something for the next meeting, we might get to something by the end of the month. And I would say May is probably going to be a big focus, May and June. Once things really start coming out for people to be involved with the master plan. So anyway, that's kind of segued and covered in the pamphlet, which was, something that we would need to get a draft on. And if someone wants to go beyond the brand that we have now, which is Pathway to the Future, we want to come up with some other suggestions that the committee could consider for the next meeting. I'm all for it. Yes.
Hi, this is Corey. A couple quick thoughts on the branding name. Make sure that has Southwick in the title, right? If it can hang it on anybody else's town line, then it won't be as relatable. Just some quick thoughts for the branding team. If you're trying to kind of get people into that mindset, a lot of times people use the "did you know?" I think someone brought that up at the very first meeting. So you could do like, did you know 20 lot can happen in 20 years, and even just pick like 1960 to 1980 and show pictures of clothing, cars, music, phones, to get people to think, wow, look, all that happened is a 20-year span. And then now say, whatever you pick for your branding tagline, Southwick 20 years from now. And then you could also put, did you know? And then on another flyer, you could put, did you know? And use some of the trends that the students found or things like that. So it gets people thinking about what can happen in 20 years. It gets them hopefully excited about, okay, wow, we're really being serious about what could Southwick be in 20 years from now. And the committee's asking me, resident number X YZ, for a say. And you put these all over town and on social media if we're allowed to do that. And that could get people thinking about, oh, it's 20 years, but look what happens in 20-year gaps. Or you could pick another 20-year time frame. But I just thought of that because all those things I mentioned change so dramatically in 20 years. Thanks.
Okay, our last daunting task of the evening is the matrix of the Imagine Southwick Trends. We had the presentation by the 2 students with the trends under the pestle moniker. So John has that available, but I think just quickly we should take a look at the matrix, the 4 boxes, kind of as a reminder. John, did we have that?
Sure. Give me just a quick
I know
moment.
Dory has a hard copy, which she'll hold up, but not everybody has a hard copy.
Sure thing. Just one moment.
And a reminder of the arrows this way and that way.
While he's pulling that up, once these are on the matrix, maybe on the brochure you use a word map. So whatever we decide is action, you know how to make a word map, like the weighted, so we can put the action bigger and then work our way down. The part would be the smaller words, but we can still include all the trends in the word map. Kind of like what's coming and just throw it all at them.
Oh, thank you, John. So here we have the pop-up matrix. And the thought is that the impact of the trend from the left-hand corner, lower left corner goes up. So it's going to increase in the impact. It's going to be more significant. Then going from the lower left to the right, we have, in our estimation, the speed of the change. Is it coming at us right now like a freight train, or is it kind of moving like a turtle and it'll get here in maybe 10 years, 15 years, but not within the next 5 or so? Anyway, that's kind of the matrix. So then we go to the future trends. And John, could you put up P1?
Sure thing.
Which was the electric vehicle accommodation. So I'm thinking in my mind, this is an easy one as to where we might put it. But the other 16 other people on the committee may not agree. But I think it would be in the upper right-hand corner. Electric vehicles are coming. They're actually, by 2035, Massachusetts is going to be zero pollution, which means we're going to have a lot of non-polluting types of transportation and so forth.
I agree, upper right.
Thank you, Mr.
$4
Williams.
a gallon for gas. And average cars, you can charge up for $7 for 15 minutes. That's impactful, right? $7 to fill your car up. I'm gonna get in line.
So that goes in the upper right, which is under action. Okay, the next one, P2, public transportation availability. So Southwick has very limited public transportation. We have the senior citizen bus, the regional transportation authority. We have no Pioneer Valley transportation, regular bus that's coming to Southwick, so forth and so on. So the question is this coming at us quickly? Do we need public transportation? Is it a trend?
So I put it in part because of things like Uber and other ride shares that younger generation tends to gravitate that way, and then the senior center can maybe accommodate the older generation. So I feel like it's a part.
I agree. I mean, the senior center just started a kind of partners program to enable some transportation for seniors, just as you alluded to. So there hasn't been a huge demand that in my tenure of a demand for public transportation. I don't know that there's an underlying trend that's going to drive that on here. So I'm with Dory. I think that's a part.
Mark?
Yep, I agree.
Thank you. Aging population and housing. The majority of the population are older people. But we have an aging population in Southwick. We do have some significant senior, privately owned and operated senior housing facility. We do have a housing authority. We have 2 places in Southwick, Depot Court and Aaron Circle. It's actually interesting with our recent census, we have fewer people living in more houses because our population went down, but yet we're building more houses. So that's something, as a planner, I look at it and I shake my head. We have fewer houses. So that may be reflected in the household size. When Ken does the analysis.
By math, right?
Right? Like we built this school to accommodate more students that didn't materialize.
Yeah.
So that would tell us that we're aging, not.
So the question is, Does this go into a planning area? Act is high.
Yeah.
The speed is, I don't know.
Wouldn't it be more of a
It's an adapt.
adapt?
Yeah, I
Adapt.
agree.
The speed of the aging population is rapidly becoming a problem. How quickly we adapt to it, I'm not so sure. I mean, are people fleeing Southwick because there's no housing for the elderly?
Okay, I'm all right with putting in an adapt, at least initially.
Yeah.
Mhm. And depending on some of the housing survey stuff, it may jump up to action. I don't know.
And it's self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
It can be self-fulfilling. So we saw that with the implementation of Rosewood and Winfield and the American, whatever it's called this week. It used to be the American, and it's changed its name 3 times in a month.
Yeah,
But-
something village.
Thank you. Southwick Village.
Southwick
But,
Village.
you know, we saw that, and you saw the impact that has on a community too.
So P4 is town or city. As people continue to move out of cities into suburbs, accelerated by work from home, our population could grow. At population 12,000, the town could vote to change from town government to city government. So we'd have a mayor and city council and that kind of thing. I mean, we are a suburban community. We've been a suburban community for quite a few years.
Feels park-like to me. See what happens. I mean, you know,
It's like big impact, but not that.
I don't even know if it's a big impact. I don't know. I'm thinking park.
Park. P4, park. Okay, we got to the next one, which is the economy. And we're looking at cannabis. Let's see, that was a potential crop, a potential new economic development area. I haven't seen it come to Southwick much. The planning board has approved 2 locations for the production of cannabis, and neither one has been built. And
One's getting close.
another one,
Yeah, they just got their variance from Board of Appeals
purchased
last
by
month.
someone else.
Yeah, they have their license.
And we have not allowed retail sales, so we don't have the local tax revenue. Yeah.
We may or we may not have, because these dispensaries are still popping up.
Yeah.
And they're not at saturation yet.
They're getting pretty close.
They are, but you know what?
Have you seen how many
drive
liquor
around
stores
town
we
to
have
get
in town? Have you seen how many liquor stores we have in town?
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
We're not saturated yet.
Every billboard in 91 is cannabis.
yeah, so I mean, why make people drive out of town to get it? They're gonna go get it anyways. Might as well give them an opportunity to get it here and let's reap the benefits of it.
So is it a plan? The impact could be significant.
I think it's action.
I don't think it is.
It's between action and adapt.
I
I think it's happening fast. I think it's
Okay.
coming fast.
Easy. I want. Population decline. I think that was, to me, the decline was an aberration because the 2020 survey was somewhat compromised because of the pandemic and a few other things going on, but mid-sized cities in New England saw a small average decline. Meanwhile, other south and west have seen population growth.
That's been going on for a long time now, hasn't it?
I think for the same reason I voted for the population growth to be a park. I think I'd say the same thing about this one. We don't really know which way it's going to go, but
I think
either way, it's
Truthfully, I think a lot of it, like you say, like pandemic stuff and people, and when you look at the American Manor of the villages, or how many units they had empty there for the last couple of years, which was probably 300 people easily that weren't there, that were there probably 4 years before that.
I've heard they're 20% capacity.
There's 20% people, 20%.
What is that? What capacity?
The American,
Who?
20% capacity.
20%?
So it's 80% vacant?
Southwick Village.
At least the main train building.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So I heard one mention of park. Park.
I don't know, I feel like it might be an adapt because we need to do something to get more people here that are younger. So we can't ignore it, and I feel like whatever goes in park, we're not going to focus on.
But the population is not changing, the speed is not high.
Well, in one instance it is, right? Because people are fleeing the cities. And COVID is a big cause of this, right? People are fleeing the cities. They can work remotely now. So they're not looking to be in Boston or what have you. We're just not reaping the benefit of those people coming into town. So how do we attract those people to come into this town if our population's?
Because we're having a hard time attracting the younger people. Amber that posted this morning, the cheapest house you can buy is $600,000 right now. If I'm 20 years old, I should not be able to afford a $600,000 house.
Unless you're in the cannabis business. Kidding, kidding.
So we're going to do, people are leaning towards adapt.
I think so.
Okay.
I don't know if
'Cause
it's
I think-
plan or adapt, but park feels wrong.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. So, I mean, this is a cut, and I don't think we're going to get through all of it tonight in the interest of time. But automation, EC3, the automation of jobs is significantly increased. Obviously, how we work is changing. Manufacturing negatively impacts availability of work for unskilled workforce, opens opportunities for new types of jobs. So things are changing automation wise. Where would we put it as far as, I mean,
Spatial.
the impact of the trend is significant and it's happening reasonably fast. I don't know what we could do for action if we put it in action.
I think it's an actionable thing. I do. Maybe you can encourage, and it ties in with what Dory's saying. Maybe you can attract college educated people to new industry that locates here or near here. Employs those people that do work to program machines or design equipment that goes into these facilities.
And we can start automating farming.
Sure. All right. EC3 is in action. E-commerce. This is our Amazon trucks. How do we control? No. A lot of e-commerce. That came quick.
This is an
It's coming
action one.
fast. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. EC4. Action.
And for what it's worth, it's literally my job. All that.
Okay, so say Dory is in charge of.
I'm in charge of e-commerce. That's what they say at work.
All right, we're into S. Opioid epidemic. So we got drug overdose epidemic. We have to have emergency services to deal with that. Healthcare facilities, rehabilitation, programs to help people, so forth.
I don't have a good feel for how much substance abuse in general is growing or ebbing or whatever in town. So I have a tough time saying, is it coming fast or not? I don't know.
It's a problem.
It's a problem, I'm sure. I mean,
I
it's
don't
the
know how,
impact, I think.
I don't know how the town, what's the town's role in I mean, obviously, emergency and medical police services, that they've already adapted to some of that. They see it every day. They're carrying Narcan, for example, that type of thing. And they have the ability to refer people and get people to resources. But on a bigger picture, when you put it into this quadrant, I don't know where.
Yeah, it used to be, something that I think a lot of communities were like, that's not our problem, that's somebody else's problem. But now it's everybody's problem.
No
So,
doubt.
I work in pharmaceutical, so that is something that I'm understanding about. But yeah, I do think it's here, it's everywhere, and it's everybody's problem.
Is it an adapt?
I think it could be an adapt. Yeah. I mean, maybe some changes as to, like you say, Narcan now, maybe there's other things that will come along. There's other drugs that will come along. You got the fentanyl and lots of dangerous things going on. So S1 is in that. Income disparities. Household income 73,776. We have 6.6% households in poverty. Gap expected to widen. We have some support services. We have food bank. We have tax relief programs. Some community public housing, that kind of thing.
And I think it hinges on the efficiency of the town. Up the industry, we may be able to bring in our existing stuff. Work in Southwick, hopefully buy a house in Southwick as well.
It's probably not just people that are coming here to work, but it's probably the elderly also that are just living out social security and
Fixed income kind of situation.
at the poverty line. But I think the town does somewhat as far as taking care of that.
Well, let's put it in action for now, because there may be opportunities with the housing plan to address some of those things. Diversity. So that's how you address it. I'd almost put it in park. I don't see much change as far as diversity.
Maybe adapt. I don't know, depending on what happens. Again, I don't have a feel for the dynamic of how diversity is changing.
I can tell you that I went to a play at the high school a few years ago and was actually surprised to see not just white kids. And I've been out of school for 20 years. So that gives you like a 15-year perspective of it was noticeable enough that I noticed it. What happens 15 years from now? Does that double? So now they're,
I think it's self-fulfilling over time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, these aren't absolutes, right? So you can actually have something that's kind of closer to park on the adapt side, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's not
right.
Yeah, right. It's kind of yeah.
It could be a low scale.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, remote work. That's right there.
No kidding.
I think, to me, that's action.
Yeah.
We need the communication infrastructure to support being able to work from home.
Sure.
And all that.
That's a no-brainer.
Very good.
Should have started with that one.
Appreciate it. Pet ownership. I'm sure we have a bylaw that limits the number of dogs and cats you can have, which is maybe
Without a
being
kennel license.
violated time to time, but that relates to pet ownership. And also animal control calls and how that's managed.
Well, sure, but there's also the recreational.
So I was waiting for someone to bring up a dog park. If they knew it was coming.
Okay, I'm gonna say we have nothing in the plan quadrant.
This is a good one for plan right there.
Wouldn't it be a good one to put in the plan quadrant?
A dog park would attract younger adults that
Yeah.
we're trying to get there too.
Yeah.
I'll support your dog park. I didn't like dogs.
What?
I didn't like dogs.
No, but you know what, going back to the
No, he's-
previous thing where we're talking about people working from home, one of the downsides of that is reduced socialization,
No doubt.
right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
having a dog park or something like that where people actually go and socialize, they're actually talking to other humans, that's a big deal. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
I don't know how many people have kids that are teenagers, but it's like trying to get them to heck out of the house these days is almost impossible. So anything that brings them with another group of people, I'm all for.
We're gonna plan for that, David.
You don't have to.
Government automation.
Well, it's high impact. So, yeah.
So, different innovations in providing government services, online voting, electronic bill paying, web-based permit applications, attending town meetings remotely, augmented reality.
Well, we got one of those already.
Mhm,
Two of them already.
mhm.
Not bad. Patent 500.
Are we adapting or are we actioning?
We're actually, I think, I don't know that.
That's
Yeah.
the plan.
I think it's planned. And
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
it's gonna
it's-
happen fast,
Yeah.
but we should still.
All right,
To a certain extent, we
I won't
control
argue.
this.
Dear God, let it be fast.
Yes.
Happens fast, it was ahead, but I think it's in there.
Okay, policing. Police force-based social workers are most effective when they live in the community in which they serve, but are often very low-paid positions. So policing is, I guess, changing in some regards to social situations versus hardcore criminal type things. What do we?
I think it's a plan to park, on that line there,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
It's more than park, it's probably plan.
Right, the
Yeah.
lower end. But I think,
Yeah.
I've had these exact discussions in my role as a police commissioner and talking to officers as to why they seem to all live in Westfield these days. The low price house in Southwick, 650 grand. So it's going to tie off. I joke, but I'm not, it's serious. One of our officers he's like the third house into Westfield from Southwick. Big price difference on Sunnyside Road, from the Southwick side to the Westfield side. So that's a real concern. And getting officers and potential college graduates with criminal justice or public administration or social degrees to want to join the police force and be a member of this community is a real challenge, a real challenge.
All right, solar energy, we're up to T.
Well, we know it's happening, right? You saw.
I don't want to get too many in action, but that's fairly significant as far as what's going on in the state.
Well, it's happening as a land use in town, right, by these commercial solar companies. And from a residential standpoint, more people are putting solar panels on their house, their homes.
I'm putting it. See how it goes. Technology in schools and jobs. Technology as far as being part of the educational system, curriculum. We have our school board. No, that's Patrick Jubb.
I was
Is our
Yeah,
school
student.
person.
even better.
Wait a minute.
Nice.
Yes, we have a student here.
Two of
Actually,
them.
Maria's on.
Two of them.
That's right.
Oh,
That's right.
right. So what was your thinking on that as far as the matrix?
I mean, it's going pretty fast. I think, as was mentioned before, COVID-19 really ramped it up very fast. All of a sudden everything's on Zoom, and even now when we came back, everything was a lot more technology. I mean, pretty much all our assignments are on computers, and I don't expect that to change. So I'd say that's pretty important. It's very fast, going up very quickly, and I'd say it's a pretty high impact as well. I mean, it's completely changing on how it's being taught.
So we're going with an action or an adapt?
I'd say it's more like a gray area, but maybe leaning more towards action.
Right on the line between action and adapt.
That's not helpful.
A lot of people who are working remote with an app. So, the people, you have to know how to be able to handle all those applications and work remote. I mean, you don't have an IT department that you can just go to. You have to figure it out. And those are the questions that they're going to start asking at the remote positions.
Even look at the technical transformation in the town of Southwick in the last 5 years and what they have roadmap for the next 5 years for the town government, right? And we just talked about it on 2 slides ago. The schools have had a tremendous technological transformation. So I don't think this is even really master plan. This is reality today. I don't think this is a trend. This is something that's already happened.
All righty, loss of farmland under the L. Let's see. Mr. Hanson, our agricultural committee representative, loss of farmland. Are we planning? Are we adapting? We have programs. We probably need to be improved as to focusing what are the most critical areas. Also, how do we keep agriculture viable?
I think it's moving slow enough to be a plan. That's just my gut feel.
We have one suggestion of putting in the plan area.
Agree?
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. We will continue.
E.
Impervious surfaces. We are constructing things that are impervious, like roofs of homes, driveways, parking lots, increased stormwater runoff. How do we feel about impervious surfaces?
That's a little bit related to, loss of farmland, so I
Yeah.
might say that's in plan.
Plan?
too.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Global warming. That can be significant. The speed is, it differs in people's minds.
We're number one, says so right there.
What?
Yeah, he's right, ranking.
We're the hottest place in the country.
Whoa. I thought they were referring to something else. Casinos. No.
Cannabis.
So what's the thought? Action?
I think it's between action and adapt, right?
END1.
I mean, Randy's had multiple, there's actually what do they call it? An adaptation grant, the program?
MVP.
Vulnerability preparedness.
Oh, vulnerability.
So we applied for and received multiple grants from the state for basically planning for and adapting to the effects of climate change. We've done some culvert action, some stormwater management action already based on those grants.
John was a real downer at a planning board with like stormwater. Hey, like doomsday is coming.
We're all gonna have lakefront property. We're all gonna have oceanfront property. All right, the last one, folks, you're doing great. ENV2, Lake Congamine Basic Aquatic Vegetation. Cheaper. We've been spending money and it's looking better, right? absolutely. Yeah. So is it kind of where we could keep planning
Plan.
for it?
Yeah.
The speed of the change, we've kind of helped slow the speed of the change, but yet it can have a significant impact, right?
That's going to be planned to, like, that should, in my opinion, that should be plan somewhere between plan and action to the upper right of plan, right? Because it's going to tie into sewers. It's going to tie into, the more we can sewer the area. We've sewered a lot of the area around the lakes, but we've talked to Suffield about them connecting to our sewers to get their septics closed off. Stormwater drainage into the lake is a big issue. We just made a 25-year investment. But if we're talking visioning, so it's definitely a plan action, but we just made a 25-year investment in the alum treatment in the lake.
So you did it, guys. We made it through this. And now the challenge is for our able administrative assistant. We didn't make it through it?
I'm sorry, what was that last answer?
Plan.
Oh, it's to the right of plan. It's
Great,
in
thank
plan.
you.
Let's don't sell past the close, Mr. Chairman. There you go.
So for Mr. Goddard, the challenge is to put these letters and numbers in the quadrants. And based on some of our discussion, which you may pick up when you listen to this tape again, populate them in certain, places in that quadrant, like we just said, ENV2 plan, but sort of towards the action. So anyway, Corey was wanting to
Yes, they just want to contribute.
Corey.
Hi, great job, guys. I just had some food for thought, and John, I'll email this to you as you put them in. But getting back to the opioid crisis, which if you talk to anybody under 30 is a crisis here in town. I agree. The police have done a great job. They walk around with the Narcan and they've got everything, but that's like saying we've got a lot of spare tires in the trunk for pothole season. What it's really about is providing more community resources to prevent addiction. It's about providing more activities and jobs for young people to keep them busy. Because a lot of, one of the great things about what adults like about living in a community like this is it's quiet, but the kids are bored. So just rethink that it's more than just dealing with people who are overdosing. It's about prevention. And are we prepared for that? And the diversity question, I would ask you to reconsider that one too, because think about it this way. If you're a minority or person of color who wants to start up a small business with the incentives that you get, would you bring that business to a 96% white community? And if we really want to grow the town and grow the tax base and grow businesses, what do we do to make it seem like we're a welcoming community to grow, to allow all types of businesses to flourish? And then lastly, on technology, I'll leave it up to the students to comment about what's going on in schools, but it kind of overlaps with economy, right? So are we preparing students and even adults for the jobs that are going to be technology driven in the future? Or do we have the infrastructure for the new types of smaller technology businesses that could boom up? And we don't even know what some of these businesses are going to be even 5 years from now, never mind 15 or 20. So think a little broadly on technology, or you can classify it under economic growth, one or the other. But it's more than just the schools, even though that's really important. So those are just some of the quick notes I had. And again, John, I'll put those in email to you. But really great job, because I've taken corporate people through a Papa matrix and they didn't do it as efficiently as this meeting did.
I didn't expect it either.
Congratulations, guys. Good job. Routine business, we have minutes to sign from the February 3rd meeting. They were approved. We need to just send those around and sign them.
Actually, let's see. I do have a note here. Looks like we may need to either sign or re-sign the January 20th ones as well.
Okay.
And we To have March 3rd, I guess,
Yes.
available if there's
March
a motion.
3rd was sent out very recently. I don't know if anybody had any comments on the March 3rd minutes. I made 2 small changes. But I got that to Megan today. So it was under new business item 4B, discussion of communication with public. Marissa Cook-Obregon mentioned publishing a notice that instead of they are, I said that MPAC is meeting and wants to, rather than reckon with, address the social media concern and affirm that it's only a means to communicate information to the residents of the town. So I'll change.
Motion approved as amended.
Thank you. Second. Motion made by Mr. Moglen, seconded by Mr. McWilliams to approve the minutes of March 3rd, 2022. Jessica, please. Roll call.
Rick Phelps,
Aye.
Dave Seaman,
Aye.
Doug Mogul,
Aye.
Randy Brown,
Aye.
David Lloyd,
Aye.
Bert Hanson,
Aye.
David Williams,
Aye.
Norm Seaver,
Aye.
Leah De Maria,
She's still with us.
I think we've lost her.
Dory Boyd, Ross Harris, Parker, aye. Obregon, aye.
If you would, please.
Yes.
Okay, so with that vote, which is a majority to approve the minutes of the 3rd of March. Do we have those to pass around to sign? Or
On their way.
all right,
We're being very efficient.
you guys are awesome.
You need a motion to adjourn at this point?
Almost. Any
Committee member comments.
to any committee member comments?
I have a comment slash
Jessica
question.
Parker has a comment.
I have a comment slash question, maybe this is for Ken, but I'm trying to figure out, so we went through, what, 4 or 5 questions that we were like, okay, yes. How do we get, I'm having a hard time figuring out, how are we getting from this now to a rough draft by the 7th? What do we need to do? I'm just having a hard time figuring out how we get that next step. Like,
Ken, are you still there?
I'm still here. I think this is where I think understanding what the committee has shared with regards to their thoughts as presented in that PDF that was shown earlier, as well as understanding that there will probably need to be some of those questions that may have scored low, either a rewrite and or a revision, utilize some of the new questions possibly, I think after you do your assessment. But to understand that it will need to address these various elements of the plan, right? And organizing it to that speed. I think the way that it eventually gets presented in one document will make it easier for the committee to go through and provide its comments, rather than what was shared before, which was 2 surveys with different intentions, both for Southampton and for Blandford, that I think now seeing one document, both in a paper form as well as an electronic form, will be helpful for the purposes of trying to make more headway in what gets struck and what gets refined further. Hopefully that's helpful, but I think that going through your initial set of comments and taking note of that, and then also thinking of how some of those questions can be refined and presented in a different way, I think will be helpful for the committee to see it and to see an iteration that is very specific to what will eventually go out.
So that being said, Ken, are you going to be able to provide us with a draft at the April 7th meeting?
Yeah, I think so. I think, if there are the questions that you've presented in that page 4 of that PDF, that may want to be considered. I think that there are some good questions in there. I don't know if the committee agrees, but maybe using my expertise in possibly using those questions and refining them in a way that makes sense within the context of your survey effort. I know that some of the questions that were scored low, but those are important questions like the demographics. There were some questions that scored zeros and ones with regards to identifying age, with regards to identifying where you live, what kind of housing you live in. But those are certain things that I think are very important to identify the people taking the survey, because from there you can do another set of analysis. So I'll be prepared for the 7th to give you what will be at least a draft of what eventually will go out after probably some more refinement. But I should be prepared to do that and talk through maybe some of the suggestions that I'll be putting forward.
Okay, that sounds good. And Eddie will look at those additional questions on that last page and see if you have any sense of importance or whatever, and we'll see how Ken may have put some of them in to what he's doing as far as a draft, but I think we made really good progress, and it's not easy. Appreciate your cooperation and help, and with that,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
motion by Mr. Mogul and second by Mr. Or close the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.